The Collins residence was less a home and more a monument to industry and wealth. Its 20-foot ceilings and marble floors echoed with the silence of a well-maintained museum. David Collins, the man who owned this gleaming structure and the multinational empire it represented, saw the silence as a badge of honor, the sound of efficient, well-oiled machinery. David was a man who measured his life in quarterly reports and board meetings. His 5-year-old son, Liam, was a beloved anomaly in his schedule, a gentle interruption he could only afford in brief, high-quality segments, a hurried weekend trip, a few minutes before his bedtime, a kiss on the forehead. The rest of the time, the emotional architecture of Liam's world was built by Elena. Elena had been with the Collins family for 8 years, starting as a housekeeper and evolving seamlessly into Liam's primary caregiver. She was a woman of quiet strength, her hands perpetually busy, her eyes warm and observant. While David's wife, Rebecca, navigated the complex, demanding world of high society charity galas and designer showrooms, Elena navigated the far more intimate world of scraped knees, bedtime stories, and whispered secrets. She taught Liam his letters, comforted his night terrors, and knew exactly which corner of the garden he liked to hide his favorite blue stone. She was the steady, grounding presence in the boy's glittering, yet often hollow, existence. This particular Tuesday was meant to be one of David's rare early returns. The jet lag from the Tokyo trip was a dull ache behind his eyes, but he promised Liam a game of chess, a promise already delayed by 3 days of unexpected negotiations that he slipped his keycard into the side entrance, bypassing the main foyer to avoid alerting Rebecca, who was likely on a conference call with her event planner. The house was quiet, save for a low murmur drifting from the den, where Liam usually played. David paused, leaning against the archway. The scene inside was bathed in the soft glow of a standing lamp. Liam, small and earnest, was sitting on the plush carpet, meticulously lining up a troop of miniature soldiers. Elena was kneeling beside him, her long black hair pulled back in a simple braid, her white apron starched and crisp. She was patiently repairing a broken plastic sword with a tiny strip of tape. Her expression was one of absolute, unhurried focus, a look David rarely afforded his own son. "There you go, General," Elena murmured, smoothing the tape with her thumb. "Back to the battlefield." Liam looked up, his face breaking into the bright, unreserved smile David often wished was reserved only for him. The child threw his small arms around Elena's neck in an impulsive hug. "Thank you," Liam whispered into her shoulder. He pulled back slightly, his blue eyes earnest. And then, he spoke the word that sliced through the polished silence of the Collins mansion like shattered glass. "I love you, Mom." David froze. The word hung in the air, a small, yet impossibly heavy, syllable. It wasn't a playful slip. It was a declaration, spoken with the utmost confidence and affection. David felt a cold, sharp shock travel through him. A beat passed. Then another. He heard Elena gasp, a tiny, choked sound, and she immediately went rigid. She quickly pushed Liam gently away, glancing frantically toward the doorway. "Liam, sweetheart," she said, her voice strained, a tremor running through her hands. "You know you shouldn't." Before she could finish, David pushed off the wall. The sound of his expensive leather shoe on the marble was thunderous in the sudden silence. "Elena?" His voice was low, controlled, but laced with a dangerous confusion. "What did he just call you?" Elena stood up, her composure instantly shattering, the white apron a stark contrast to the sudden pallor of her face. "Mr. Collins. I apologize. It was a mistake. I will speak to him immediately." Liam, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, started to whimper. He looked from Elena's frightened eyes to his father's hard, unreadable face. "Daddy," he said, clutching Elena's skirt. "Why is everyone angry?" David didn't look at Liam. He stared at Elena, his mind a hurricane of professional betrayal, paternal inadequacy, and profound, simmering resentment. "A mistake, Elena. He called you Mom. You have been living under my roof for 8 years, being paid generously, and my son, calls you Mom." The den door swung open, and Rebecca walked in, drawn by the raised voices, perfectly poised in a silk robe, her face a mask of annoyance that quickly morphed into pure disbelief as she assessed the scene. "What in God's name is going on here?" Rebecca demanded, her voice rising to a high, sharp pitch. The chaos had begun. The small, quiet word had cracked the golden cage wide open. Rebecca, impeccably groomed even in her silk loungewear, stepped fully into the den. Her gaze, sharp and assessing, moved from the distraught Elena, to the confused Liam clutching her skirt, and finally landed on David. "David, explain this. Now," she demanded, her voice betraying the icy control she usually maintained. David, still grappling with the shock, struggled to articulate the depth of the transgression. He called Elena, Mom, Rebecca. Just now. Not Elena, not Ellie. Mom. He spat the word out as if it were contaminated. Rebecca's eyes widened, a flicker of something raw, hurt, rage, or perhaps just wounded pride, crossing her features. She walked quickly towards the center of the room, positioning herself between Liam and Elena, effectively cutting the bond. "Liam Collins," Rebecca said, using her sternest voice, the one reserved for dealing with overly aggressive bidders at auctions. "Come here, sweetie. You know who your mom is. You know that's me." Liam shrank back, tears welling up. "But Elena fixes my toys, and she reads the sleepy stories," he mumbled, looking desperately for the reassuring touch that was now withheld. "We pay Elena to fix your toys and read you stories," David interjected, his voice regaining its corporate edge, the tone of a CEO demanding answers for a failed merger. "That's her job. She is an employee, Liam, not your mother." He looked directly at Elena, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Isn't that right, Elena? You understand your role here." Elena finally managed to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Mr. Collins. Of course. Liam, please, I am Elena. Your father and mother love you very much." The lie, or rather, the half-truth necessary for her survival in this house, felt heavy and hollow. "But I love her too," Liam insisted, his little voice cracking. "She smells like sunshine, not like perfume." This simple, innocent observation, contrasting Elena's warmth with Rebecca's expensive, distant scent, hit Rebecca with the force of a physical blow. Her composure vanished. "That's enough." Rebecca's scream was shrill, shattering the last vestiges of dignity in the room. "You have crossed a line, Elena. This is not just a mistake, this is emotional manipulation. You have been cultivating a relationship with my son that is completely inappropriate for a paid staff member." Elena took a step back, her back hitting the large oak bookcase. "Mrs. Collins, I swear, I have never encouraged him to call me that. We were playing, and sometimes he gets confused when he is tired, or maybe it just slipped out. Children say things, children say what they hear, Elena, or what they feel is true." David countered, circling her slowly like a prosecutor. "And what Liam feels is that you are his mother. How long has this been going on? Is this some sort of sick game? A way to establish leverage?" The accusation of professional scheming was the final insult. Elena's eyes, usually so serene, flashed with sudden, genuine hurt. "Leverage? Mr. Collins, I adore Liam. I have raised him since he was an infant. But I know my place. I came here from my country to work, not to steal a child's affection." "What country?" Rebecca sneered, suspicion turning into outright hostility. "We hired you through an agency years ago, but we never delved into your past, did we, David? You just seemed so perfect, so compliant." She turned to her husband. "Do we even know who she is? Does she have children of her own? Is that why she feels entitled to ours?" David looked sharply at Elena. This was the question he hadn't dared to ask. The agency vetting had been superficial, a check of her papers, a reference confirming her discretion. But in 8 years, Elena had never mentioned family, never taken more than a few days off for personal reasons. Her life began and ended within the walls of the Collins estate. "Elena," David stated, his voice now dangerously quiet. "Do you have a family? Children?" Elena lowered her head, looking at the spotless floor. Liam was still crying softly behind Rebecca. The sudden spotlight on her personal life, the one sanctuary she kept fiercely guarded, was unbearable. I have no children, Mr. Collins," she whispered, a clear lie, or perhaps a truth shaped by tragedy and distance. She quickly amended the statement. "No children here. My family is far away. I haven't seen them in a long time." Rebecca wasn't satisfied. "Far away? In a village somewhere?" "David, I want her out of the house tonight. I want a private investigator here tomorrow morning to trace her background. She is a threat to Liam's psychological well-being." David hesitated. Firing Elena meant chaos. Who would handle Liam's morning routine? Who knew his food allergies? But more importantly, Liam's declaration had exposed a glaring flaw in the Collins family structure, a chasm of neglect David was not yet ready to face, and Elena was the scapegoat. "You're right, Rebecca," David conceded, his business instinct kicking in. Damage control was paramount. "Elena, pack a bag. We need to reassess your position here. You can stay in the guest annex for the night. We will discuss severance tomorrow." Elena didn't argue, didn't cry. The defeat was evident in the slight bow of her head. She looked at Liam, a silent, profound apology in her eyes, before turning to leave. As she walked toward the service door, she noticed a small, faded photograph tucked into the frame of the living room mirror, a picture of a young, smiling woman holding a baby. It wasn't Rebecca. It was her own mother. Years ago, the irony was not lost on her. She had spent 8 years creating a perfect, loving home for a boy who wasn't hers, while the boy who was hers remained only a phantom memory, kept safe inside a tiny, locked locket she wore beneath her uniform. The truth of her own painful motherhood was about to collide violently with the manufactured perfection of the Collins world. The den door clicked shut behind her, leaving David, Rebecca, and a sobbing Liam alone in the sudden, echoing silence. The cold marble felt colder than ever. The den, minutes ago a scene of raw, explosive emotion, was now sterilized by Rebecca's sharp anger. Liam's cries had finally subsided into heartbroken sniffles, and he now clung to the arm of the leather sofa, refusing to look at either of his parents. "You see, David?" Rebecca hissed, keeping her voice low but potent, her arms crossed tight across her chest. "This is precisely what I've been warning you about. We allowed her too much access, too much intimacy. She was crossing boundaries we didn't even realize existed." David ran a hand over his face, feeling the exhaustion of the jet lag mixed with a new, searing guilt. He was a master of corporate strategy, capable of dissecting multi-billion-dollar deals, yet he was utterly paralyzed by the simple crisis unfolding in his own home. "She's been with us 8 years, Rebecca. She's virtually family," David argued, then immediately regretted the word choice. "She is staff, David," Rebecca corrected him ruthlessly. "And you have neglected your duties as a father so completely that a hired hand has usurped my place." "My place? Do you know how humiliating this is? What will people say when they hear Liam has more affection for the help than for his own mother?" David bristled at the emphasis on public perception. "This isn't about the country club, Rebecca. This is about Liam. He is genuinely attached to her." "Why?" "Because we aren't here." Rebecca stepped back as if struck. "I am here. I manage this house, I manage your social calendar, I manage Liam's private school applications, and I dedicate my life to maintaining the status that allows you to fly off to Tokyo whenever you feel like it. You think a child's love is simply a matter of presence? It's about structure, David. Discipline. Not baking cookies and letting him track mud through the foyer." The argument quickly devolved from Elena into the long-standing, unacknowledged deficiencies of their marriage. Their relationship was a partnership built on finance and ambition, carefully maintained under the gilded facade of success, lacking the foundational elements of genuine warmth and shared parenting. "You haven't read him a story in 6 months, David countered, his own inadequacy fueling his aggression. "The last time he had a fever, you were at the Met Gala. Elena sat by his bed all night. And she was paid handsomely for it." Rebecca shot back. "That is the transaction, David. We pay so we can maintain the lifestyle that you built. If I have to choose between comforting a mild fever and securing a major donation for the foundation, I choose the donation. That is what secures Liam's future. Elena's affection is disposable. Our financial stability is not." Suddenly, Liam spoke from the sofa, his voice small and defeated. "I wish Elena was still here." His words instantly silenced the fighting parents. David looked at his son, seeing the small, vulnerable figure who had just witnessed the emotional unraveling of his family structure. David knelt beside Liam, forcing himself to soften his demeanor. "Son, listen to me. Elena is tired. She's taking a break. But your mom and I, we are here for you. We are always here for you." Liam shook his head stubbornly. "No, you're not. You're always on the phone. Elena listens." The truth landed heavy and painful. David stood up, his gaze troubled. "We need to handle this properly, Rebecca. Firing her immediately, without cause other than wounded pride, will hurt Liam. And it will look bad. We need to find out exactly what she's hiding, then we can manage the separation." Rebecca reluctantly agreed. "Fine. She stays the night in the annex, but she is suspended from all duties concerning Liam immediately. Tomorrow, I want to see the PI's report before lunchtime." She smoothed her robe, her mind already shifting into crisis management mode. "I'll handle Liam tonight. You go deal with the office." Down in the small, immaculate guest annex separate from the main house, Elena was packing her few belongings. Her hands were steady, practicing the calm she had learned over years of service. Her mind, however, was in turmoil. She had spent 8 years building an armor of professional indifference, ensuring no one ever saw the cracks. But Liam had shattered it with one word. She reached into the pocket of her discarded uniform and pulled out the tiny, tarnished silver locket she always wore. It was warm from her body heat. She clicked open the clasp. Inside, 2 miniature photographs lay side by side, one of a younger Elena, radiant with youth, and the other of a baby boy, a child whose dark eyes held an uncanny resemblance to her own. This was the secret Rebecca sensed, the past David couldn't fathom. This was the source of the profound, bottomless love she poured into Liam. He was a surrogate, a temporary replacement for the son she had left behind, the son she hadn't seen in 8 years, the son whose name was Daniel. She had come to America with one goal, to earn enough money to bring Daniel over and provide him with a life free from the grinding poverty she had fled. But the years had stretched into a decade, and the economic demands had kept her trapped, sending money home while her own child grew up on grainy video calls. Liam calling her "Mom" had been a shock, but deep down, it was a confirmation of her own desperate maternal heart. She had become so adept at being a mother to Liam that she had forgotten how painful it was to be absent from her own. "It's time, Daniel," she whispered to the locket. "If they investigate, they will find you. This is the end of the job, and the beginning of the fight." The storm that was brewing was not just about employment and betrayal. It was about 2 boys, separated by wealth and circumstance, and the fierce, protective instinct of a woman who had been a mother to both, in very different ways. The private investigation would not just uncover her past, it would set in motion a chain of events far more destructive than David or Rebecca could imagine. The morning at the Collins residence was thick with a calculated tension. Liam had been ushered off to school by David, a stiff, formal interaction that lacked any of the easy warmth he shared with Elena. Rebecca spent the early hours in her office, ensuring every detail of her private investigator's brief was precise and incriminating. By 10 o'clock, a lean, sharp-eyed man named Mr. Thorne, specializing in corporate espionage and background checks, was seated across from David and Rebecca in the sterile environment of David's home library. "The goal is simple, Mr. Thorne," David stated, leaning forward over the mahogany desk. "We need to understand Elena's true motivations and her background before we proceed with termination. She has demonstrated an inappropriate emotional attachment to our son, Liam. We suspect concealment regarding her personal life." Rebecca interjected, handing Thorne a copy of Elena's original employment file, a sparse document from 8 years prior. Specifically, her claim of having no children needs verification. "We need to know who she is, where she came from, and if she has any immediate family still residing in the States or overseas. We need this report fast, Mr. Thorne. By tonight." Thorne nodded, his demeanor coolly professional. "Ms. Elena Rodriguez. Originally from a rural region in the Philippines, according to these papers. A name and a region are often enough to begin the digital excavation, Mrs. Collins. We'll start with immigration records, financial transfers, and any deep web social footprints." As Thorne left, the Collinses sat in silence, the weight of their decisions heavy between them. "I still feel uneasy about this, Rebecca," David admitted, running his hand along the spine of a leather-bound book. 8 years. Loyalty must count for something. Maybe it was just a phrase Liam picked up. Loyalty. "David, her job was to serve us, not to replace us," Rebecca scoffed, standing to pace the room. "And don't be naive. That kind of devotion isn't professional. It's personal, possessive. She is either a deeply troubled woman projecting her own motherhood onto our son, or she is working an angle. Either way, she has to go. Liam will adapt." David hoped she was right, but the image of Liam's small face, tear-streaked and confused, clung to his mind. He knew Liam wouldn't adapt easily. Liam had lost the only consistent, reliable source of affection he'd ever known. Meanwhile, in the small, well-furnished guest annex, Elena was not resting. She was preparing. She sat on the edge of the bed, her laptop open, the screen displaying a complex spreadsheet of 8 years of transactions. She knew they would investigate. David Collins was a man who handled disruption with decisive corporate efficiency. Her time was up. She initiated a series of encrypted communications, emails written in her native language, detailing her imminent departure from the Collins household and containing a final, large wire transfer. The funds were substantial. 8 years of meticulous saving, denying herself everything, had accumulated a sum that was enough to start over, enough to achieve the one goal she had sacrificed everything for. The recipient of the communication was her sister, Clara, still living in their small coastal village in the Philippines. "Clara, I am coming home. The job is over. It ended in exactly the way I always feared. The money is transferred. It is enough for the paperwork, the schooling, and the passage. Tell Daniel I will be there soon. Tell him his mama is finally coming to get him. That I need you to be ready. This needs to happen quickly. I cannot risk them finding him before I get there. They are already looking." She closed the laptop, a wave of profound relief and paralyzing fear washing over her. She had won the financial battle, but now she faced the emotional one. Explaining her decade-long absence to the boy she had left behind, she looked down at the silver locket. Daniel was now 13, a young man she only knew through pixelated screens and whispered phone calls. Would he even recognize the woman who had traded his childhood for a gilded cage in America? Late that evening, Mr. Thorne returned, looking neither tired nor triumphant, merely efficient. He placed a thick file on the library table. "The report is comprehensive, Mr. and Mrs. Collins," Thorne began, his voice flat. "Elena Rodriguez's background checks out on paper, clean record, valid visa, all standard. But her financial history and her stated personal life are entirely misleading." He opened the file to a page displaying a grainy photograph of a small house by the sea. "Elena Rodriguez does not have no children. She has one son. Daniel Rodriguez. Born roughly 2 years before she started employment here. Rebecca gasped, placing a hand over her mouth. A son? She lied. She actively concealed this. Indeed, Thorne confirmed. The reason is likely financial. She supports him entirely. We tracked regular, significant wire transfers to an address in the southern Philippines, handled by a woman identified as her sister, Clara. The funds sent over the last 8 years are substantial, far exceeding typical family support. David felt a cold sickness pool in his stomach. The realization was both devastating and clarifying. Elena hadn't been plotting against them, she had been fighting for her own child's future. Her deep, unwavering love for Liam was simply the overflow of a heart starved of its true purpose. And why did she leave him? David asked, his voice rough. The circumstances are unclear from the documents, Thorne replied. But a significant portion of the recent transfers went toward a costly medical procedure for the boy's father, Elena's husband or partner, who passed away shortly after she secured employment in the States. She came here out of absolute necessity. She sacrificed being a mother to one child to financially save him, and then to provide a life for the son who remained. Rebecca looked at the file, her initial anger now replaced by a chilling realization of Elena's quiet sacrifice. So, Liam calling her mom was because she was channeling her missing motherhood into him, Rebecca murmured, the words sounding hollow. Yes, David whispered. Liam was filling the void of the son she left behind. And she was filling the void of the parents Liam barely saw. The truth was a harsh mirror. The Collinses hadn't lost their son's affection to a manipulative servant, they had lost it to a woman who understood sacrifice and maternal love in a way they never had. What is her status now? David asked Thorne. Interesting, Mr. Collins. Just this afternoon, immediately after you requested this investigation, Elena initiated a final, massive wire transfer. And she booked a one-way flight. Thorne slid the final piece of paper across the desk, a ticket stub. Flight departs tomorrow evening. Destination, Manila. She is leaving the country. David stared at the ticket. The game was up. Elena was abandoning her golden cage, but she was taking the most painful part of their family's secret with her, the stark evidence of their failure, the revelation of Elena's truth, the existence of Daniel, the dead husband, the years of silent, financial sacrifice, had knocked the wind out of the Collinses. They were not confronting a corporate spy or a gold digger, they were confronting the stark, painful reality of motherhood sacrificed for survival. David tossed the flight ticket onto the table, his face a grim mask. She's leaving. She's taking the money and she's going back to her son. Rebecca sank onto the sofa, the silk of her dressing gown rustling softly. Her initial rage had curdled into a devastating self-pity. She booked the flight today. She knew we'd find out. She timed her escape perfectly. Escape, Rebecca? David's voice was laced with self-reproach. This wasn't an escape from us. This was a sprint back to her life. A life we essentially purchased for 8 years. He walked over to the tall windows, looking out at the manicured grounds that suddenly felt like the walls of a prison. We paid her to be a stand-in, and she did a better job than either of us ever could. But David, the deception. She lied right to our faces, Rebecca protested, trying to cling to the moral high ground, but the foundation was crumbling. Lies born of desperation, David sighed. She knew that if she mentioned having a child, we, the great Collinses, wouldn't have hired her. We demanded a clean slate, a servant with no messy emotional ties. And she gave us exactly what we demanded. He turned back, his eyes finally seeing his wife, not just the society figure, but the insecure woman beneath. And in doing so, we essentially hired a better mother for our own son. The silence that followed was agonizing. What do we do now? Rebecca asked, her voice small. We can't let her just leave. If Liam finds out she abandoned him after he confessed his affection. She couldn't finish the thought. We have to talk to her, David decided, the corporate strategist reappearing, focused on mitigating the relational damage. She needs to understand that we know the truth. And we need to ensure this separation is handled in a way that minimizes the damage to Liam. The meeting took place an hour later, not in the den or the library, but in the sterile, neutral space of the kitchen, late in the evening. Elena was summoned from the annex. She entered, expecting the harsh dismissal and accusations. Instead, she found David and Rebecca seated stiffly at the breakfast nook, a silent understanding passing between them. Demar. Thorne's file lay closed on the counter. David began without preamble. We know about Daniel, Elena. Elena flinched, her carefully constructed calm fracturing. She closed her eyes briefly, accepting her fate. Mr. Collins. Mrs. Collins. I apologize deeply for my deception. I assure you, it was only so I could secure the position and provide for my son. My devotion to Liam has always been genuine. I never intended to harm him or replace his parents. We believe you, Rebecca said unexpectedly, her voice softer than it had been in years. The report clarified a lot for us. The sacrifices you made, they are evident. David continued, his tone formal yet laced with respect. We also know about your flight. We are not going to stop you. We are terminating your employment immediately, effective tonight, but we will provide you with a full year's salary as a severance package, in addition to what you have saved, as a token of gratitude for your service to Liam. Elena looked up, stunned. She had prepared for fire, not this unexpected grace. Mr. Collins, that is far too generous. I lied to you. I don't deserve, you deserve to be with your son, Elena, David interrupted gently. And we deserve to face the consequences of our own neglect. You were paid to care for Liam. You exceeded those requirements. This payment is for the emotional service you provided, the service we failed to deliver. Elena fought back tears. The generosity was overwhelming, yet the pain of leaving Liam was a physical ache. Liam. I love him, truly. He is a wonderful boy. Please tell him I had to go to my mother's home to care for her. Rebecca nodded, unable to meet her gaze. We will find a way to explain it to him. But you must leave before he wakes up in the morning, Elena. It will be cleaner. Of course, Elena whispered. She stood, realizing this was the final moment. She looked at the counter, catching sight of the closed file that held the secret of her life. Mr. Collins, one last thing. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out the tarnished silver locket. This is Daniel, she said, opening the clasp and holding it out. I want you to see him. When Liam called me Mom, it was because his heart saw the devotion meant for this little face. David took the locket, his strong fingers trembling slightly as he looked at the tiny, faded picture of the baby boy. He saw the resemblance, the same earnest eyes as Elena. He felt a profound connection to this unseen child, the boy whose life had shaped his own son's caretaker. We wish you safe travels, Elena, David said, handing the locket back. Go be a mother to your son. With a final nod, Elena left the kitchen. She walked through the silent mansion one last time, past Liam's closed bedroom door, and out to the annex to complete her packing. She took nothing but her clothes, her papers, and the memory of Liam's bright, unreserved smile. By midnight, Elena Rodriguez. The maid who had been a mother, was gone. The golden cage stood silent once more, but the silence was now weighted with accountability. The Collinses were left alone with the wreckage of their marriage, the needs of their son, and the unsettling question of how they would begin to parent the boy who had just lost the only constant mother figure he had ever known. The next morning, the silence in the Collins residence was not the familiar, efficient quiet of a house run by perfect staff. It was a heavy, emotional void. Liam woke up and, as was his routine for the last 5 years, padded down the hallway to the service stairs, ready for the warm scent of Elena's special cocoa and the sound of her humming. But the service door was locked. The kitchen was empty, save for a new, unfamiliar housekeeper, hired urgently overnight by Rebecca's assistant. The woman, middle-aged and nervous, offered Liam a bland, pre-packaged cereal. "Where is Elena?" Liam demanded, his lower lip trembling. David and Rebecca, sitting awkwardly at the marble counter, a place they usually avoided, exchanged a worried glance. This was the moment of truth. "Liam, buddy," David began, forcing a cheerful tone. "Elena had to leave. She went home to her family." "Her family?" Liam's blue eyes were wide with confusion. "But she said she didn't have a family here. She said we were her family." Rebecca took over, adopting the carefully constructed narrative they had agreed upon. "She does have a mother who is very old, darling. She needed Elena to go back and take care of her. It was very sudden, and very important." "Did she leave a note for me?" Liam asked, scanning the spotless counter for any sign of his friend. David and Rebecca hesitated. In their haste to manage the crisis, they hadn't considered the need for a physical artifact of goodbye. Elena, in her own rush, had left nothing. "No, sweetie," Rebecca admitted gently. "It was too fast. But she sends you lots of love. She wants you to be a very good boy for mommy and daddy." Liam processed this information, his face closing down. The initial confusion gave way to a cold, profound sense of betrayal. He hadn't just lost his friend, he had been abandoned right after his deepest, most vulnerable expression of love. "She promised me," Liam whispered, his voice dangerously low. "She promised we would build the new castle today. She never breaks a promise." He pushed the cereal bowl away, the clatter echoing in the vast kitchen. Without another word, he turned and marched back up to his room, locking the door behind him. The following days were marked by a suffocating quiet from Liam. He refused to engage, answering in monosyllables, and spent all his time in his room, surrounded by his toys, the ones Elena had painstakingly fixed. The Collinses, reeling from the sudden collapse of their child-rearing structure, made desperate attempts to step into the role Elena had vacated. David, canceling his afternoon meetings, tried to organize a soccer game in the expansive backyard. Liam stood listlessly, refusing to chase the ball, finally looking at his father with an unsettling maturity. "Elena didn't like soccer, Daddy," Liam said flatly. "She liked looking at the bugs under the rocks, and she knew the names of the flowers." David realized he didn't even know the names of the flowers in his own garden, a space Elena had made Liam's sanctuary. Rebecca, abandoning her social calendar, tried to bake cookies, a disaster that ended with smoke alarm blaring and burnt sugar stuck to an antique tray. "This is ridiculous," Rebecca muttered, wiping flour from her expensive silk apron. "I'm a CEO's wife, not a domestic goddess. This isn't my skill set, David." But it was Elena's, David stated, his voice devoid of judgment, merely stating a painful fact. "She wasn't just a maid, Rebecca. She was the heart of this home. And now the heart is gone." The emotional gap left by Elena was exposing every flaw in their foundation. David and Rebecca found themselves spending more time together than they had in years, but it was not time spent in intimacy, it was spent in a tense, shared custody of guilt and anxiety over Liam. One evening, David walked into Liam's room and found his son sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding the small, broken plastic sword Elena had taped the night of the incident. "Are you okay, buddy?" David sat down carefully, not crowding the boy. "Do you love mommy?" Liam suddenly asked, looking up at his father with eyes too old for his face. The question caught David completely off guard. "Of course, I love your mommy." "Why would you ask that?" "Because Elena said that people who love you stay," Liam replied simply. "And you and mommy always leave. And now Elena left too. So, who is going to stay?" The profound fear of abandonment articulated by his son shook David to his core. He realized their failure wasn't just in being absent. It was in being inconsistent. Liam had learned the terrifying lesson that affection was temporary, and loyalty was conditional, even when offered by his own parents. That night, lying sleeplessly next to Rebecca, David finally articulated the core of the problem. "We need to go back to the beginning, Rebecca," he said quietly. "We need to re-examine what we built this life for. The money, the status, it's all irrelevant if our son believes the only reliable love comes from the hired help. We have to be the ones who stay." Rebecca turned to him in the darkness, the faint light from the window catching the shimmer of tears in her eyes. "But how, David? I don't even know how to be the mother he needs." She knew everything about him. "I know his allergy list and his trust fund balance. That's it." David took her hand, a rare gesture of intimacy. "We start by learning the name of the flowers, Rebecca. We start by failing together, instead of succeeding separately." The Collinses were standing at a precipice. The storm Elena had created was subsiding, but it had left them in the ruins of their own making. To truly save their son, they had to save their marriage, and redefine what home meant in the absence of the woman who had truly made it one. That the first weeks without Elena were a masterclass in failure for the Collinses. David, despite his best intentions, struggled to switch from CEO to full-time father. He tried to apply his corporate planning strategies to Liam's schedule, detailed activity charts, time-blocked reading sessions, and a daily bonding KPI, key performance indicator, list, which Rebecca wisely tore up. Rebecca, stripped of her social commitments and forced into domesticity, felt clumsy and resentful. The new housekeeper, Mrs. Denton, handled the house with professional distance, but Liam treated her with the same icy indifference he now directed at his parents. The turning point came when David, trying to make amends for the soccer incident, suggested they explore the backyard again. "Liam, show me the garden," David asked one Saturday morning, genuinely interested this time. Liam reluctantly led him to a small, hidden patch behind the rose bushes. "Elena called this the quiet place. She said the world can't bother you here." Liam pointed to a cluster of small, delicate blue flowers. "What are those?" David stared at the flowers, feeling an acute stab of shame. They were beautiful, but anonymous. He pulled out his phone, not to check email, but to snap a photo and run it through a plant identification app. "They're forget-me-nots," David read aloud, the name ringing with a painful irony. And Elena was right, they liked the shade and they're very quiet. Liam looked at his father, a tiny flicker of interest returning to his eyes. "Elena said they were brave because they grew where the roses didn't want them." David knelt down, truly seeing the flowers and, through them, seeing Elena's gentle philosophy reflected in his son. "She was very smart, Liam. She saw things we didn't." From that moment, the Collinses changed their strategy. They stopped trying to be Elena, they started trying to understand what she had given Liam. Rebecca cancelled her entire roster of spring events. She replaced her charity committee meetings with trips to the local library, reading books on child psychology and attachment theory, topics she found far more complex than corporate finance. She discovered Liam's obsession with space. Elena hadn't just read him bedtime stories, she had taught him constellations. That evening, Rebecca led Liam onto the balcony with a blanket, armed with a cheap telescope and a star map app. "See that really bright star, Liam?" Rebecca pointed, her fingernails chipped from the previous day's unsuccessful attempt at gardening. "That's Jupiter. Elena told you its Roman name, didn't she? The king of the gods." Liam nodded slowly, lying close to her under the chilly night sky. "Elena said Jupiter was big and powerful, but he was always watching over his family." Rebecca swallowed hard. She was right. "And you know, Liam, when I was busy with my charity work, I thought I was making the world better for you. But I wasn't watching over you. I was focused on the wrong things." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry I wasn't here, sweetheart. I'm going to try to be better. We both are." Liam looked at her, his expression a hesitant mix of skepticism and hope. He didn't say, "I love you," but he leaned his head against her shoulder. It was the first physical comfort he had accepted from her since Elena left. The Collins marriage, once a meticulously arranged business contract, began to transform into a functional, if fragile, partnership. They scheduled their days around Liam's needs, not their careers. David pushed back his Tokyo meetings, and Rebecca outsourced her charity event planning to focus on homework and dinner. They were awkward, they made mistakes. But they were present. 3 weeks after Elena's departure, David received a package at his office. It was a padded envelope containing a letter written in neat, elegant script, postmarked from Manila. It was from Elena. David opened it immediately, his hands shaking slightly. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Collins, I hope this letter finds you well, and more importantly, that it finds Liam beginning to heal. I wanted you to know that I arrived safely. I am home with Daniel. The generosity of your severance has changed our lives entirely. Daniel is starting a good school, and I am finally able to be the mother he needed me to be for so long that I know Liam is confused and probably hurt. I write this not to make excuses, but to help you help him. The reason he called me Mom was not because I tried to steal his affection, but because I gave him the one thing he felt was missing: consistency. He knew I would be there every morning and every night. He knew I would always tell him the truth, even if it was just about the names of the flowers. You don't need to replace me. You need to be predictable. You need to stop being David Collins the CEO and Rebecca Collins the socialite. You need to be just Mom and Dad, who show up, even when it's hard. That I have also enclosed something for Liam. David looked inside the envelope. Tucked beneath the letter was a small, vibrant drawing. It was a picture of the earth, surrounded by stars, and two small figures were holding hands on the ground, one big, one small. Scrawled underneath, in a child's hand, were the words, Jupiter is always watching. That it was a final, loving message from Elena to Liam, channeled through her heart. David handed the letter and the drawing to Rebecca. As she read Elena's simple, powerful words about consistency and presence, a single tear tracked a path through her polished makeup. She gave us the solution, David, Rebecca whispered. The ultimate business plan for our family. She didn't want our money or our status. She just wanted us to stay. The drawing was framed and hung in Liam's room. It wasn't just a picture, it was a map back to the heart of their home. The Collins family was slowly, painfully, rebuilding itself, guided by the quiet sacrifice and clear-sighted wisdom of the maid they had hired, and the mother they had fired. Months passed. The Collins mansion, once a cold monument to David's ambition, began to soften. The changes weren't cosmetic, they were structural. David had learned the names of every plant in the garden, not just the forget-me-nots. He instituted a strict, no-phone zone, from 6 p.m. until bedtime, a boundary he fiercely protected, regardless of the crisis in Tokyo or New York. During this time, he was simply Liam's father. They built elaborate Lego castles, not just for an hour, but until they were truly finished, a lesson in follow-through and consistency. Rebecca's transformation was perhaps the most profound. She had always equated motherhood with providing the best material environment. Now, she understood it was about providing the best emotional environment. She retired from her role as the head of her largest charity and took on a smaller, more hands-on role, dedicating her newfound time to Liam. She mastered the bedtime ritual. She learned the exact cadence Liam needed for his space stories and how to mimic Elena's gentle back rub. One night, months after Elena's departure, Liam lay in bed, looking up at her. Mommy, he whispered. Rebecca froze, her heart catching in her throat, instantly recalling the shock of that first utterance. Yes, sweetie. Can we go see Jupiter again tomorrow? It looks like a giant marble. It was a simple, innocent request. It was the first time he had called her Mommy with genuine, relaxed affection since the crisis. It was the sound of a wound finally beginning to heal. The Collinses, having faced the truth of their failure, finally started communicating with each other, and with their son, honestly. The tension that had defined their marriage had been replaced by a quiet, cooperative focus. The golden cage had been discarded, the house was now a home. One sunny Sunday, David and Rebecca sat in the quiet place, watching Liam meticulously drawing pictures of astronauts next to the cluster of forget-me-nots. I still think about her, Rebecca admitted softly. Elena. She taught us how to be parents by leaving us. She did, David agreed, reaching out and gently touching a blue petal. I used to think my money could fix any problem, but Elena showed me the value of things you can't buy. He paused, then pulled a small, folded document from his pocket. "I did something a few weeks ago. I wasn't going to tell you, but I think you should know." Rebecca looked at the document, printed on heavy legal paper. It was a formal trust declaration. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a fully funded education trust for Daniel Rodriguez," David explained. "Elena's son. It covers his education through university. It's anonymous, it's being handled by a third-party solicitor in Manila. She'll never know it came from us." Rebecca read the details, a slow smile spreading across her face. This was not a business move, it was an act of genuine, heartfelt gratitude. Why? Because she paid a massive price to give Liam what he needed, and that price was missing 8 years of her own son's life, David said simply. "This isn't payment, Rebecca. This is just ensuring that her sacrifice was truly worth it. That both boys have the future they deserve." Rebecca leaned over and kissed him, a gesture that was tender and genuine. "You're a good man, David Collins. You're learning." "We both are," David corrected her. Liam looked up from his drawing, seeing his parents share this intimate, loving moment. He smiled, a genuine, radiant 5-year-old smile that reached his eyes that he stood up and walked over to them, not clinging, but standing confidently between them. He pointed to the framed drawing of Jupiter, which now hung prominently in the sunroom. "Elena said when you look at Jupiter, you remember your family is watching," Liam said. "I don't need to look at the sky anymore." He looked up at David, then at Rebecca. "You are watching now." The small boy, once trapped by his parents' ambition and rescued by a maid's quiet love, was finally safe. The mom, uttered in shock, had torn apart the artificial structure of the Collins family, forcing them to rebuild a foundation strong enough to hold a true family. Elena had found her way back to her home, and in doing so, she had shown the Collinses the path back to theirs. The storm had broken, and the healing began under the clear, steady gaze of two parents who finally understood what it meant to stay. The word spoken by 5-year-old Liam, "Mom," was not merely a childish slip, it was an explosive truth that detonated within the carefully constructed fortress of the Collins family. This small, shattering utterance forced David and Rebecca to confront a profound, uncomfortable reality. Their wealth and ambition had engineered a life of material opulence for Liam but had starved him of the emotional bedrock of consistency and presence. The longtime maid, Elena, who they had hired to manage their domestic needs, had instead become the default architect of their son's heart. The resulting chaos was a necessary and brutal catalyst. David, the corporate titan, and Rebecca, the socialite, saw their carefully curated roles as parents instantly invalidated. Elena's subsequent interrogation revealed a sacrifice far greater than any they had ever contemplated. She had left her own son, Daniel, in the Philippines, working tirelessly in the Collins gilded cage to fund Daniel's future and healing. Liam's affection was not a deliberate act of manipulation by Elena, but the powerful overflow of a mother's heart desperate for a child to nurture. Elena's flight, a final act of professional grace and personal liberation, aided by the massive wire transfer and the discreetly booked one-way ticket, left behind not a void of betrayal, but a vacuum of accountability. She left them with the ultimate corporate strategy for family life, penned in a simple letter: consistency. She confirmed that the one thing money couldn't buy was the predictable, reliable presence that Liam craved. The following months were a painful period of deconstruction and rebuilding for the Collinses. They stepped awkwardly into the shoes Elena had filled, learning the names of the forget-me-nots and the constellations, discovering the deep, quiet language Liam shared with the woman who knew his heart better than they did. David learned to trade market analysis for Lego construction, and Rebecca swapped high society galas for late-night telescope sessions, finally understanding that true status came from the love reflected in their son's eyes, not the approval of their peers. The story concludes not with Elena's return, but with her powerful, enduring influence. Liam's eventual, genuine acceptance of Rebecca as "Mommy," a title earned through patient effort, not biology or wealth, marked the end of the crisis. The final, symbolic gesture came from David, the establishment of an anonymous, fully funded educational trust for Daniel in Manila. It was an acknowledgement that Elena's sacrifice had bought their family a second chance, and that this debt could only be repaid by ensuring the future of the son she had risked everything for. The tumultuous events initiated by a single word had ultimately forced the Collins family to dismantle their flawed foundation and rebuild it with genuine engagement. The mansion remained, but the golden cage was gone. They learned that being present was the truest form of love, proving that even a millionaire's family, broken by neglect, could be healed by the quiet, sacrificial love of the woman they had simply hired to clean up their lives. The chaos had passed, and the family finally found their home in one another.